space to learn something new tonight. We've already seen, oh, Red is laughing. We've already seen how AI has transformed so many different things. And tonight we're going to be diving into numbers, which can be scary for some, but we have a subject matter expert here. Okay. And so leading us through this topic is Shaniece Bennett. She is the founder of AccuTrack Consulting and Accounting Services. She brings deep experience in accounting, financial management, and small business strategy. And she's going to show us how to use AI tools to bring clarity, control, and strategy to our finances. So make sure that y'all have an open heart, an open mind, be curious, ask questions. We want the engagement. And make sure you're using that chat to communicate, okay? And Shaniece is going to go through some housekeeping rules, but let's get started and learn how AI can help our finances make sense. So, Shaniece, it's all you.
Thank you, Dominique, for that warm introduction. And I'm going to echo Dominique's sentiments. Thank you all for joining us on an evening to learn about AI. And then I know financing and accounting is not everyone's favorite subject, but I'll do my best to make it easy to understand and easy to digest. With that being said, I typically like to have very interactive sessions, but because this session is being recorded, I'm going to ask everyone to remain on mute, but still use the chat and the emoji feature. I'm going to do my best to answer the questions that I see in the chat. And if you have a question about a topic that we were talking about at that time, feel free to raise your hand. I will do my best to get that answer for you. If not, I do have time at the end to go back and answer any other questions you all have. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Today's topic, again, is going to be using AI for forecasting and budgeting purposes. And our goal is really to focus on how can we leverage AI to help us with financing and budgeting for businesses. And there will be a couple of opportunities for you also to learn and apply what you're learning. I want to tell you right now, we are going to be using ChatGPT along the way. So I encourage you to go ahead and open up your ChatGPT. I will be using Google Gemini as my demonstrations, and I would love for you all to follow along because I will be asking you for your feedback and what information you are receiving as you enter information into your ChatGPT. Our objectives, once again, is see how we can use these tools for forecasting, and then also how can you use these tools for scenario planning. And that's what we really want to dive into. And I want you to be able to experience that while we're on the call this evening. So I have a question for you all. I'm going to ask you to put your answers in the chat. Have you ever created a monthly forecast for you or your business? Put yes in the chat or no in the chat. I'm kind of curious to know who's on the call and how you're currently using forecasting. Yes, no. I'm waiting for some responses. I'm waiting for, okay, no. I understand accounting and forecasting is probably not everyone's favorite subject, but I want to tell you a story. I recall not so long ago, many small businesses and nonprofits faced barriers getting access to those dollars like the PPP loan. And some of the common reasons that they were not able to get that access is because they didn't have up-to-date or accurate financials. A lot of small businesses were still using manual softwares and manual processes to properly document and update their financials. However, organizations that maintained their financials were better positioned to take advantage of these relief programs that came out. Moreover, this came primarily out of COVID. Many organizations that do maintain a cash flow budget or forecast, they were better equipped to handle the financial uncertainty during COVID. And also they better understood their plans, their financial plans and their runway. So when you hear me say runway, I'm really referring to how much cash do I have on hand to get me through the next couple of months. And so folks who did forecasting and budgeting, specifically cash flow forecasting, they had some idea of how much cash they had on hand and how long it would take for them to run out of cash. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in hearing whether or not you or small businesses have utilized budgeting and forecasting, because it can help position you for some things that are not necessarily planned. So with that being said, Let's talk about budget versus forecast. And oftentimes you'll hear some accountants or financial people use the words interchangeably, and it's okay. But I want to define budget and forecast for tonight's purposes. When I think of budget, I typically think of a strategic plan where we're setting some targets for a benchmark, maybe setting some targets for goals for some time in the future. So usually setting targets for like revenues, how many customers or how many jobs we're going to close, or how many contracts we're going to close, maybe reducing our expenses, or maybe having a certain number of employees by a certain period of time, maybe even raising capital or getting access to capital. When I think of budget, I'm thinking these are targets that we would like to achieve in the future, usually within a year. Forecast, on the other hand, is where you're looking at current and historical data to estimate where your business is actually heading in the near term. So what do you think your cash flow will look like in a month or two? How many revenue or how many jobs will you close or complete within the next couple of weeks? Forecasting is usually updated on a more frequent basis, and it gives you a realistic outlook on your future financial performance. In today's session, we're going to focus on forecasting, looking at what's going to be happening in the near term, monthly and quarterly. Question that I have for you all, and I want you all to put it in the chat: where do you think you get forecasting information from? Where does businesses get their forecasting information from? Go ahead and use the chat to share your responses. So forecast, again, we're looking at historical data, trying to predict what's getting ready to happen in the next couple of months. Where can you get it? I see Rias or Ria, I hope I said your name right. You use Chat GPT for budgeting. Absolutely. Ready? Research, that's great. Nishant, I see you said QuickBooks and ADP, ERP. So it sounds like you all have some systems out there that you can go to rely on. But for the most part, the information that's used to develop a forecast comes from your historical financials, which can be QuickBooks. ADP has your historical payroll reports. It can also be current sales pipeline. Currently, you may have written a couple of proposals for some RFPs. You may have issued some proposals and you're waiting on answers back. So knowing what's in your sales pipeline, even knowing what your strategic goals are when it comes to access to capital. Economic factors can also help us with the forecasting. So Brad, you're right, a lot of research. Think about when you say research, and I think of economic factors, the loss of the government contracts because of the new executive order that ended DEI, or even these tariffs that are causing product delays and launches, and maybe even causing some funding rounds to be delayed. So having access to this information, that sounds like a whole lot of information from different sources. We use that to build our forecast. Now, I'm curious to know if any of you have been affected by any government contracts being lost because of the new executive order, or maybe even tariffs that have impacted your business. Anyone been affected by that? Please say yes in the chat. I'll tell you my story. So our firm, we are a federal contractor, and we were, hint, hint, enrolled in the SBA 8A program. However, prior to the change of administration, we were following very closely the information that was being presented. And I was one of those few folks who read Project 25. And based on what I saw, I knew that 8A program was not going to be beneficial for me and my firm. So we had to decide to pivot very early on. And so when you start thinking about forecasting, I'm like, okay, we have the election coming up in less than 12 months. What are we going to do in the event that we lose this contract? So that's what forecasting helps you do. So some of the other benefits of forecasting is you make better decisions. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Strategic resource allocations. For example, we have staff who was on contracts on site at some of these federal sites. When those governments shut down, where did that staff go? And we had to make decisions about that in terms of who's going to be doing audit work this month versus who's doing accounting work. Also, forecasting helps you, again, track your goals, and more importantly, track your progress towards those goals. I like to say when we give our team profit sharing, we have certain metrics that we share on our dashboard about where we are in terms of profit margins. And so we can start, or they can start to plan for their profit sharing check by the end of the fiscal year. And then for me, making sure we have the cash to pay that check out. So it also helps with improved cash flow. And for those of you who are like many of us in small businesses, our access to capital is so limited that it's important for us to forecast our cash flow to make sure that we have access to the cash before we need it. And then there are different types of funding. For example, I might need cash just to cover payroll for a month because I'm on a federal contract and we may not get paid for another 2 to 4 weeks. I don't want to go take out a long-term loan for that and pay interest on it. For me, when I look at my cash flow in situations like that, I would go to a line of credit. Maybe you would look at financing through a credit card for short-term financing shortages. And then more importantly, the benefits of forecasting is risk management, because you have an indication of what has happened in the past based on a research, based on information we know about the economy. You could identify some potential risk that may go on in the future, hint, hint, my staff in Colorado, and then start to implement changes so that you are not necessarily impacted negatively or minimize the negative impact. I'll also tell you all that during COVID, many of our small business clients did survive partially because they knew their cash runway. Remember, runway is how much cash that they had on hand. And so they were able to quickly adapt to spending and maybe prioritize some spending. So maybe not paying off the credit card in full like we typically would recommend to our clients. Let's hold on to some of that cash that you have here because you're not going to get that cash coming in. The upside, once again, was that many of these businesses forecasting models and methodologies were strengthened, and now they're emerging with better long-term financial habits. So that's just to give you an overview of the benefits of forecasting. I want to talk a little bit now about some of the tools that we use in order to help us forecast. Now, historically, my favorite tool was a spreadsheet. And I will use historical information and put it into a spreadsheet and start putting formulas in order for it to calculate the answer that or the forecast that I was looking for. The issue with that was oftentimes I can't get access to the information when I need it. Or when I do get the information, it's not everything that I need. Sometimes the information was outdated. For example, I have your copy of your W-2s and it tells me how many employees you have. Well, that's how many employees you had as of last year. If I'm doing your forecast now, that does not necessarily mean that's the number of employees you have this year. Also, the old way of forecasting was we may have missed some patterns and missed some market changes. For example, I don't have time to go and do a lot of research to see what's going to happen for different businesses and different industries. And so if there is a major change, let's say a major change in the technology industry or in education, I don't spend a whole lot of time researching those things. But if we're doing forecasting for someone, we may miss some information. And here comes the power of AI with forecasting. Now, with AI forecasting, you have access to information very quickly. You have access to information that you may not even be able to research. For example, what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the capital markets. And with these tools, you can link your historical financials so that you can always have dynamic and up-to-date information. So the question then becomes, well, how does AI actually work? Or how do I know I can rely on this information? Machine learning. And so how many of you utilize QuickBooks? Just out of curiosity. If you use QuickBooks, put a yes in the chat. I want to know how many of you use QuickBooks. As I can tell you something about QuickBooks. For over a decade, QuickBooks has been learning how different businesses and different industries categorize their transactions. And based on all the information that QuickBooks or Intuit has gathered over the last decade or so, it's able to quickly identify patterns, quickly able to identify and new information, And then QuickBooks actually provides you with a forecast, at least a starting point for your forecast. Some other tools that we use for AI, like someone put in the chat, I use Chat GPT to help me with the forecast, is the Chat GPT has access to information like new tax codes, how that's going to impact you. You can ask about that. Has information about what's going on in capital markets, whether or not you're going to be able to get access to investments or not, or venture capitalists, and also up-to-date information about supply chain disruption. And so this machine learning, not only through QuickBooks, but that's the one a lot of us use, but machine learning has enabled so many software providers to continue learning and improve the accuracy and relevance over time. And that information is what powers AI. So now we're able to analyze more data, find more patterns. It also reduces the bias and errors. Sometimes there were human errors when we were doing our forecasting. And once again, it's consistently learning and improving over time. And so what I would like for us to do is a quick exercise. I want to copy something in a prompt in the chat. This is where I want you to open up your Gemini. I'm using Gemini. I want you to open up your Chat GPT. And I want you to put this prompt in there. In the prompt, I have graphic services underlined. I would like for you to enter your product or your service. So you copy and paste this prompt, and I'm going to switch out of this screen here. And I'm going to switch over to my Chat GPT, and I want to copy and paste that same prompt in there. Hopefully you all can see. And right now it says, hello, Shani. That's my nickname. What's up? Hello, Shani. Ask Gemini. So I'm going to put this little prompt in here, and let's see what Chat GPT tells me. It says just a sec, and it really did take a sec. My question was, for those of you who are driving and may not be able to see the screen, I am a business that sells graphic services to other small businesses in the Metro Detroit area. I want to increase my profits in the next 6 months. List 3 profit drivers and then suggest ways that I can improve my margins based on recent transactions. So a couple of things I want you to note there. I told ChatGPT what product or service I have. I told ChatGPT the location of the area. I told it I want to increase my profits, and I even gave it a time frame. My question asked it how to improve my margins based on recent transactions. I didn't give ChatGPT or Gemini any information about my margins or my transactions. But look at here. I have at least 3 recommendations from ChatGPT. Where does that information come from? Well, a lot of these things can be applied to many businesses. For example, one of the things that ChatGPT told me was to implement an effective pricing strategy. That's the number 2. And then it lists a whole lot of different ways that I can go about making or implementing that pricing strategy. I want to stop sharing here, and hopefully you all had an opportunity to put the prompt into your Chat GPT, and I want to see what some of your responses were. And then once you share what those responses are, I may call on a few of you to ask you, was that what you were expecting? So go ahead and put in the chat, what was the response you received from your Chat GPT from the prompt that we posted? I understand not everyone will be able to do it, so I'm going to share the screen to show you all what Chat GPT shared. But what did you receive as your response from your Chat GPT or your AI tool on how you can improve your profit margins? You feel free to raise your hand, come on, and I'll call you off mute, but also feel free to put it in the chat. I'm really interested in seeing what some of those responses were. All right, seeing none, I will continue to move forward. Hopefully for the next prompt, you all will be able to follow along with me, because there will be one more hands-on exercise, and I would love for each of you to try it. So the next question that I have for you all deals with, well, what tools are out there for us to be able to get information like our transactions or our current profit margins and plug that into a solution and then have that solution help me build a forecast. Remember, the forecast really is going to depend a lot on your historical financials. So for those of you all who use QuickBooks, that's one source for you right there. And while QuickBooks does have some forecasting tools in it, whatever tool you use, you can link it to so many other softwares that are listed here on the slide. LivePlan, for example, is one of the tools that I like because you get the chance to do some scenario planning in LivePlan. You have things like Fathom HQ. Fathom HQ is beautiful. It looks beautiful. I'm a visual person, so while yes, it connects to my QuickBooks and has all these numbers and formulas going on, what I see on the front end are some beautiful, colorful charts. There's some other ones like Salesforce and UpMetrics, and many of these have a fee associated with it. But one thing you can do is you can go into ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT which of these softwares work best for you, and you can even ask it to compare the pricing and compare the benefits of it. And that way you can identify and pick which tool works best for you. Now, these, of course, are not all of the tools, but these are just a few tools that I'm aware of and some that we've used. Curious to know if you use Jirap. No, we have not used Jirap for our clients at all, but I do know it's one of the most popular ones and one that's recommended, but it comes up a lot in the ChatGPT that I use Perplexity for research, and it comes up a lot in Perplexity. Next question I have is, how can you use AI to help you save money? And this again is where I want you to go into your ChatGPT, and I want you to paste the prompt that I'm getting ready to put into ChatGPT and use the same exact prompt. It says my burn rate is 2.5 months. If sales dip by 10% over the next month, what should I do? Go ahead and put that prompt into ChatGPT. And one of the things I want you to understand here is we're actually giving the AI software some of our financial information. That 2.5 burn rate has to be calculated based on my spending and my bank account balances. Yes, ChatGPT doesn't quite know what my sales are, but I'm curious to see what it says. What should I do if my sales dip by 10%? And I really want to know in the next 2 months. What I can do in the next couple of weeks is not the same thing that I can do a year from now. So I really want to know, what can I do right now? Someone asked the question, what is burn rate? Burn rate represents the number of months it would take you to run out of cash based on your current financials. And so I'm saying I have about 2.5 months of cash available before I run out. And so one of the reasons why I like this prompt is because we know cash is queen. And what we want to figure out is how much cash do we have and what can we do to get more cash? So I'm going to switch here from my slideshow and I'm going to go over to ChatGPT and I'm going to paste that same prompt. And this time, before I hit enter, I want to hear from you all. What were the responses that you received when you asked ChatGPT what you should do in order to improve your burn rate? Precious, I see your hand raised. Do you want to come off mute and share with us?
Sure. So my prompt says, step 1, freeze non-essential spending. Delay or renegotiate provider payments because my business is dental insurance company. So we have provider contracted payments. It says trim variable costs and activate premium collections. And then it says step 2, short-term revenue stabilization. Target warm small groups, upsell existing clients, leverage dental provider relationships, and partner locally.
So first of all, Precious, thank you for sharing. I'm assuming you used ChatGPT before because it knows exactly what you do.
Yes.
Do you find that information to be helpful?
Very.
Great. So those were some very good examples. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and I encourage the others, if someone else has some good answers, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand so you can share as well. But my chat, this Gemini does not know my business. Actually, I'm on my personal page, and so it really does not know my business. And when I ask it, what can I do if my sales dip by 10%, the first thing is it gives me a defensive strategy, which says to stop bleeding and extend your cash runway. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it says immediately reduce discretionary spending. if I use my chat GPT on a regular basis, it would identify what my discretionary spending is and tell me to stop using or stop spending so much there. Oh, wow, maybe it does know me because it has PPC on here. PPC is a software used by auditors. Oh my gosh. And so it tells me to suspend critical marketing, PPC, for example, that doesn't have a proven immediate return on investment. PPC is very expensive, but it helps me stay compliant. And so I don't know if I can reduce my spending, but maybe I can cut back on some of the subscriptions that we have. Someone in the chat says mindset suggests factoring. Wow, negotiating with buyers and reducing expenses. For those of you who do not know what factoring is, that's a method of financing your receivables. So if you have a short cash flow and you need some cash right now, you can factor it. And what that does is you can collect pennies on a dollar. When I say pennies on a dollar, I'm talking maybe 80 to 85% of the accounts receivable. You can borrow that money, and then when an accounts receivable comes in, it pays it out to the person or organization that you borrowed it from. And so someone said delay non-essential spending, and you would have to define non-essential. But as we saw with Precious, if you're using Chat GPT on a regular basis, it probably knows what your non-essential spending is, and it will give you that example of what you should probably stop spending your money on. And so when we try and figure out ways that we can, one, forecast and save money, if we're using Chat GPT on a regular basis, it's learning our style, it's learning what we do, it's learning where we spend our money, and it can give you exact examples that you can go in and implement. And again, I like to ask for more than one answer because I may not necessarily be able to not use my PPC subscription because auditing is what we do. But I ask for multiple answers, and then I will pick which one that fits best for me. And so for those of you all who may not have been able to put the prompt into the chat, I have it on the slide here. A couple things that it says: reduce personnel or subcontractors. It says reduce software subscriptions, marketing and advertising. Well, what if I don't have marketing and advertising? Well, do you have softwares or do you have subscriptions that you're paying for? Even on the personal side, I keep delaying our HelloFresh, and then after a while, I was like, just cancel it because I'm going to the grocery store anyhow because it's less expensive to go to the grocery store. So some of those subscriptions that we have, if you're using your Chat GPT or you're using it online, it knows that it can make those recommendations for you. A couple other things to note about this is be very, very careful about adding confidential and sensitive data into Chat GPT. I'm quite sure there are going to be some other sessions through BTS that's going to talk about security and safety when utilizing AI. But I always tell folks, if you can disguise the information, go ahead and disguise the information so that, one, you're not giving away confidential, sensitive information that AI is using to learn. So they will be using your confidential information to learn and eventually share responses. It may not necessarily reference the information directly that you put in, but it's definitely learning how you use it, learning what your outputs are because you're giving it the financial information. I love to use Chat GPT just as a generic strategy. However, I have seen folks upload financial statements, ask the Chat GPT to generate graphs and reports and to generate financial dashboards. And so I have seen that happen, but those folks generally have what we call the closed closed AI, where they're paying a fee for it. And then also they turned off certain security, turned off certain features so that Chat GPT cannot use their information. Before I go any further, I would like to pause here to see, are there any questions that anyone has based on the information we've covered so far? Any questions? I saw someone ask a question about changing privacy settings. I do know, Rachel, that you can do it. I didn't do it in Perplexity. Someone did it for me. So I'm not the expert on that, but I'm quite sure there are going to be some other series in the BTS virtual AI series where they can answer those questions for you. But I encourage you all, if anyone else on the call has some suggestions for Rachel, go ahead and put those into the chat as well. I'm looking at Anata post. She says, qualify the impact protect cash flows, all right, boost revenue quickly, adjust pricing margins, and build a cushion. Building a cushion tells you to build a safety net, try and get you some minimum dollar amounts in your bank account. One of the things I also like about asking ChatGPT for information is we get inundated with information, and oftentimes we also have things that we have to do. I was just telling Dominique earlier, like the highlight of my day was really when our email went down. Like that was not what I was supposed to be working on. And we get things coming at us so many times, like, well, what should I be focused on? When it comes to forecasting, for example, and Annetta, you have 5 different strategies here. Well, how do I know which one I should focus on? Well, having responses where ChatGPT explains to you what it takes to implement these things is like, you can ask yourself, do I really have time here? Or the one I have says personnel is to review current being outsourced, maybe like copywriting, development, a virtual assistant, and then bring that work in-house. Right now, I know that the hiring market is for us accountants. We have a 1% unemployment rate, and so it's not feasible for me to really hire someone. So I'm like, well, I can't do that one. But those softwares and subscriptions, I can run my credit card statement and have it pull out all the names of the software subscriptions, and maybe start making some phone calls, or maybe even start going online to cancel some accounts. And so when we're trying to figure out what should we be focused on, we utilize ChatGPT to kind of help us figure that out. And then you decide what's going to be best for you. One of the things I also like ChatGPT for is when you're looking to launch a new venture or a new business, and you're asked to put together a business plan with some financial forecast. Sometimes we just don't have access to the information to do that on our own, but ChatGPT does, because some folks have already been feeding their financial information, and then you can use that to leverage their information to build out those financial forecasts and help you put together numbers for your business plan. I always like to leave some time at the end to ask questions that are related not only to the forecasting and budgeting and AI, but any financial questions you all may have. I'm a CPA. I do more than just taxes. You guys just heard me talk about auditing, but we primarily provide accounting, auditing services, and tax services to individuals and small businesses. And so are there any questions that I can help you all with now? Go ahead and raise your hand. I'm going to scroll through the chat to see whether or not there were any additional questions in the chat. Okay, Precious, thank you. Oh yeah, that's what it was. Turning off that improved model for everyone. One of my friends wrote a book, and when she was writing a book, that's who told me how to turn it off in Perplexity, because she didn't want the information that she was going to be putting in her book to be used as a model for everyone else. So yeah, she was the one who showed me how to turn that feature off in my Perplexity. I'm looking in the chat now. I'm looking for, and I don't see any additional questions. Wow, it's a pretty small group here. So one of the things I always tell folks, whenever someone gives you the opportunity to get consulting for free, you take it. So with that being said, are there any questions or concerns that I can help you all with that relates to finances? Adriana in the chat says, how does one forecast when income and expenses are unpredictable? That would be scenario forecasting. So Adriana, the first thing I tell folks is you want to have what we call a baseline forecast. And Adriana, would you mind coming off mute and tell me, do you sell a product or a service? And I can tell you how to get a baseline forecast. Product or service?
No, I don't own a business. I'm more here just on a personal level. So I usually would use ChatGPT for like personal expenses like rent, day-to-day groceries, things of that nature. But I don't actually own like any businesses. But learning this has been pretty important. So
are you
trying to implement it into my real life? I am.
Are you okay? So I would not plug my paycheck into ChatGPT, but I would tell ChatGPT, this is my average take-home pay every 2 weeks or every month. Here's my average rent, my average monthly expenses. Then you can put that information into ChatGPT and ask it to build you a budget template. Then you take that template, and sometimes you can export that template into a sheet or a spreadsheet. And then if you want, you can put your real numbers into that template. And because you told it some of the expenses you have, like rent, it's going to also say if you're using a W-2, it may even put things on there like automobile, may put things on there like loan. You can then use that template to fill in, and that will be your base forecast. Your base forecast should represent what you realistically think will happen in the next couple of months. And then I like to do what we call scenario planning. Scenario planning says, when you go back to ChatGPT after you calculate your numbers in your spreadsheet, and it says, this is how much income or money I have left over, or this is how much money I am short by. Tell me what I can do to improve this number. And so ChatGPT would then make some recommendations for you there. And once again, you figure out which method works best for you. So hopefully that helped you, Adriana, with your personal, using ChatGPT for your personal budgeting reasons.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I see another question in here. How good is AI in researching what competitors are charging service-based businesses? I will tell you this, I don't trust everything that ChatGPT says. For example, today I put in ChatGPT, and I know that there are a couple of conferences that I wanted to go to, and I asked it to compare the conferences in terms of dates and time. And it spit back out to me that this conference is in June. And I'm like, no, this conference is in December. And it came back to me and said, yes, you're correct. So when it comes to researching, I will look more for industry averages, because you can't trust everything that ChatGPT says. And we also know that there are bad actors out there who will feed information to the system that they know is incorrect. And that may throw off your numbers. So I like to use ChatGPT, but I always ask ChatGPT to cite your sources. When I use things like Gemini, Perplexity automatically cites sources. But when I use things like Gemini, and you're asking that question right there, and it gives you back an answer, I'll say, cite the source. And if it gives you some source and you go look at that website, or you can even look at the name and determine if it's reputable or not, that will let you know whether or not you should use that information. And so that is a very good thing I think folks should do. Would I be better off telling it to get information from a specific site like Fiverr? Yes, if you do know some very reputable sites, you can do that. The only thing is, small businesses, we're not public companies. So that means we're not obligated to share our information with anyone. So what you don't know is, when they give you information back, is that information from a small pool of service businesses? Is that information from businesses that are on the West Coast? Sometimes you don't know that. It could be information from businesses that have been around for 100 years, and maybe you've only been around 10 or 5 years. And so your financial situation may not look just like theirs. I'm a big fan of being very specific with prompting AI when you're researching information specific to your region, how long you've been in business. If you have children, for example, and you're doing budgeting, and your children are in private school or they're involved in some sort of sporting activity, I would definitely go ahead and do that. Another question, as a business owner, how much would you recommend them to put aside for taxes if your business is based in the city of Detroit? And if you're married, on average, and if you're in a moderate income range, anywhere from 20 to 30% you want to set aside. That does sound like a pretty high number, but that's 20 to 30% on your profits, not your top line, not your revenue number. So you get to deduct expenses. And then what I would tell folks is to, one, consult with your tax accountant, because if you are a business owner and you're not on payroll, you're supposed to be submitting your taxes every quarter, which means you need to keep your financials up to date so you can see what your profits are every quarter, and make sure you submit the taxes that you owe just for that quarter. If you wait until the end of the year, it's a possibility that you may owe more taxes, and the IRS, the state of Michigan, and yes, the city of Detroit is going to come back at you and assess penalties for you. And so it's always nice to set aside some money. I have some clients who are, I call them, they lack discipline. They're profitable businesses, but they lack discipline. What I mean by lack discipline, they see money in their bank, so they go take it out. And I'm like, wait, you haven't paid your taxes just yet. And so folks say, well, what recommendations do you have? There's this strategy called Profit First. It's actually based on a book. And we've been using Profit First. When I say we, my firm has been using Profit First for the past 5 years. And what Profit First does is it has you set up several different bank accounts. Yes, I know it's difficult. But what I tell my clients is whatever account you want to use to set aside your tax money, put it into a small account. Do not get a debit card, and make sure that bank is nowhere near you. It's that way you put the money in once a month. Usually you won't have easy access to that month money. And so that's what Profit First does. It says, hey, you need a bank account for all your revenues so you can track how much revenue you receive every month. You get a bank statement. You can say, this is my total revenue. You want to put a bank account for all of your taxes. And so you're setting that money aside, preferably somewhere where you can get access to it, so that when it is time to pay taxes, your money is there. Set aside money for profit sharing. Set aside money for what your operating expenses are. I want to say it's 7 buckets. Now, I don't have 7 bank accounts. That was too much for me. I did 5 though. I did do 5, and I do have my tax savings account at a credit union that has a branch nowhere near me. And so that's one of the recommendations that I do have for my clients when they're trying to set aside money for their taxes or any other expenses for that matter. Any other questions that we have? I'm using ChatGPT right now to truly understand the impact of this one big, beautiful bill. There are a lot of different sources of information, and while most of them overlap and that they're consistent, sometimes there are a couple of things that we have unique situations, and I want to know how does this one big beautiful bill impact my clients with unique situations. When I say unique situations, we have clients who are raising funding for launching the new products or services, and so investment. And I want to know how that big, beautiful bill is going to affect them. We have clients where we typically, one of our #1 tax saving strategies is for folks to purchase fixed assets. If you need a new vehicle for your business, if you need new equipment, we say go ahead and purchase that equipment, because there's this tax strategy we have that you can reduce your taxes on. Well, that's changing in one big beautiful bill. It's changing for the better for small businesses, but I'm kind of curious to know, how does things like that impact my clients? And so I would do a little bit more research, and I would tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm in the process. I need to raise $2 million. I'm in round 2, blah, blah, blah. Tell me, what do I need to know, and how this one big beautiful bill is going to impact me? If I'm specifically interested in certain things like tax credits, manufacturing companies, because we're here in Detroit, there are tax credits for producing things here in the US. That's probably going to go away. And I want to know, my clients kind of rely on those credits. Some of us, we use those credits to take our family on vacation. Now that credit is going away, and we're doing some planning for a client. I need to tell that client, next year you can't take the cruise. You might just have to go to Cedar Point. And that's just the way it is, because of the new one beautiful bill that's out there. And so I like to use it to try and stay on top of information, but I do rely on credible sources like our industry newsletters, the AICPA, the MICPA for CPAs. And I think you should do the same thing. But when you're looking at information and it doesn't jive, or there's some discrepancies between them, I will go to ChatGPT, preferably Perplexity, because it's going to tell me where it's getting the information from. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. I know sometimes you're going to come up with a question after the session is over. So I have put on this slide here how you can reach me. If you scan the QR code, it's going to take you directly to our contact us screen. So you can go in there, put your information in, and tell me what your question is, because I'm like, oh man, I should have asked that question when it didn't come to mind, or there was a question I wanted to ask at the beginning of the hour and I can't quite remember what that question is. So if you do have questions after the session end, don't hesitate to connect with me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And so my LinkedIn is the correct spelling of my name. Folks say, well, how do you spell your name? It's S-H-A. I'm my auntie's first niece. So it's Shaniece. That's how I got my name. My aunt named me because I'm her first niece. Also take a look at our website. And then again, if there are any other questions that folks have, don't hesitate to send me a message on LinkedIn. And with that being said, I want to stop my share. I'm going to hire them back over to Dominique with BTS. And I really thank you all, 1, for participating, and 2, for again showing up on an evening to talk about finances, specifically forecasting and budgeting. I appreciate your time.
All right. Actually, you know what, Shaniece, there's one more or it might be two more questions, kind of like a combo from Red. Are you able to answer that?
Sure.
Really quick. So the question is, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can read because I'm trying to scroll and find it. I'm at the top. I don't see it.
Is AI or GPT a good source for tutorials on using accounting software, or does these softwares usually have robust tutorial built in?
It depends. I'm going to say softwares like QuickBooks do have a lot of robust tutorials built in, and there are a whole lot of YouTube videos on YouTube. We have just switched over our CRM to Zoho. There are not a lot of useful tutorials in Zoho. So I have been going into ChatGPT, literally asking Zoho, how do I set up mass mailing? And it would give me step-by-step instructions. For the most part, it worked. However, my email went down for a whole hour today because I did something that ChatGPT Perplexity told me to do, and it was a mistake that I made. It was an error on my end. So I called Zoho. I had to call GoDaddy, but I will say I learned a whole lot from Perplexity about how to set up mass mailing in Zoho because Zoho did not have that tool or tutorial built in. And we do have consultants, but they cost too much, and sometimes I want an answer right now. And that's the other beauty of ChatGPT. It's available whenever I'm available. That was a great question.
Okay. All right. Any more questions before we conclude? Yeah, 1 minute or 30 seconds. Okay. Well, you saw the QR code, so I hope you were able to scan that and put in your information for Shaniece and her team to keep in contact with you. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight for Finance and Budgeting with AI, forecasting, cost savings, and modeling. I hope you all were able to walk away with something new, some new insights to bring more clarity and confidence to you when you're making financial decisions for your personal finances or even your business, either one or both. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's next. So our next session in the BTS Virtual AI series is happening this Saturday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Is going to be Marketing with AI, Story-Driven Branding and Campaigns featuring Sierra Turner. You can find the registration link in the BTS bio on our socials, as well as in our newsletter. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. This was an amazing session, by the way. And I hope you all are giving Shaniece a round of applause. I see some thank yous. You know, this was extremely informative. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All of these things. Like, listen, we have these amazing experts that are giving you all of this information. And I hope that really, really you were able to take some of it and know that we have some more coming your way. Also, don't forget about the Black Tech Saturdays Virtual AI Series Showcase. This is where you literally can share what you learned, built, or even explored throughout the series, okay? Because we started the series this week and we're going all the way until December. So keep an eye on your inbox. You should be getting an email around 7:30 with more information, in addition to a link for you to submit to be potentially a participant during that showcase. And of course, last but not least, again, just reiterating, please stay connected both with Shaniece to follow the incredible work that she is doing through AccuTrack Consulting and Accounting Services. And also make sure you're staying connected with Black Tech Saturdays as we continue to create spaces for learning, innovation, and access for all, okay? Thank you all again for spending your evening with us. We hope you have an amazing night, a great weekend ahead, and we'll see you later. So bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, Shaniece. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Bye, everyone.